I'm Arnie Weissmann, editor-in-chief of Travel Weekly, and I'm joined today by Greg Takehara, the CEO of the industry nonprofit Tourism Cares, two travel journalists, freelancer Aaliyah and Bruce Parkinson, a senior editor for Travel Pulse Canada, and from the Adventure Travel Trade Association, CEO Shannon Stowell, and board members Kimberly Daly of Daly & Company, and Choonee Wright of the law office of Choon T. Wright. This trip to Jordan was organized by the Jordan Tourism Board of North America, which wanted to address some geographic misperceptions and to reinvigorate tourism to the destination. The war in Gaza has negatively impacted visitation to Jordan, and so, to some extent, this was a fact-finding mission for the attendees. I do want to stress before we begin that this will be a tourism discussion and not a political discussion about the war. Time is reserved at the end of for your questions. Use the Q&A button to ask questions, and while we may not have time to get to every question, Jordan Tourism Board representatives will follow up with email to answer any questions we don't get to. But let's begin before the trip actually began. Did any of you have any trepidations about going to Jordan at this time?
Arnie, I kind of did. I've been to Jordan probably 7 or 8 times before, and of course, never had any issues at all. But it was not lost on me that our government, the U.S. government, had made some moves in the region that could cause a lot of resentment. And so I did have in the back of my head wondering, would the Jordanians be as kind and welcoming as my previous experiences? And then I also wondered if the timing was right, for a trip like this, because we definitely didn't want to go and just have a good time. This was a trip with a mission, and did not want that to be interpreted wrong. And I didn't know if it was too early. But I'll say, after being there on the ground for more than a week, first of all, the Jordanians were incredibly kind and welcoming. And I'll share an example. Of course, the hotels that we stayed at, everybody was very kind to us, and the restaurants, we were giving them business. But also, one day, I stepped out of our van, and there was a gentleman who was pumping gas, and I stepped out, and he caught me by surprise, and he goes, "Where are you from?" And he had piercing eyes, and I thought, oh boy, here it comes. And I sort of squeaked out, USA. And he said, "Oh," huge smile. He said, "I love USA." And I said, "I love Jordan." And we had this wonderful little interaction. And it was just typical of all the conversations that I had over those 8 or 9 days. And then as far as whether the timing was right, I came out absolutely convinced that it was the right time to be there. And we had a lot of really deep and meaningful conversations with locals about the challenges next door and how that impacted tourism, which is obviously severely impacted.
And so, I mean, and sometimes I think people who are very experienced travelers find this out, that the times when people might be nervous about going are the best times to go. So were you in any crowds at all, or did you have some of the most, iconic places sort of to yourselves?
We really did. I mean, Petra, I wouldn't say it was empty, but it was almost empty. So from a traveler perspective, of course, that was really enjoyable. Of course, we really felt for all of the little guides and guide businesses and restaurants and all of that. And then when we went to Bethany beyond the Jordan, we were alone at first. And so being in that sacred spot and having no one else there, I found it very moving.
Yeah. Did anybody else have any trepidation about going, or were you all pretty enthusiastic?
I was certainly enthusiastic, but some of the people around me weren't, my wife included, and people who just thought it was a dangerous time and to go to a potentially dangerous place. And honestly, you would not know that there is a war going on 150 kilometers away by being in Jordan. There was no indication at all. There was no heavy police presence, army presence. there was none of that, and it was welcoming to an amazing degree. So I understand why people, can have trepidation about going to places when there's a conflict nearby, but this was a great example of how distance is relative, and you can be not that far away and be in a very safe place.
Yeah. Now I know Shannon has been to Jordan multiple times, but for some of you, this was a first visit. So, Chuni, can you share some of your experiences and impressions?
Yes, absolutely. And first, I want to just comment on the something you said, Arnie, which is sometimes the times when people aren't traveling is the best time to go. And many years ago, right after 9/11, on 9/11, I had a ticket to Nepal for 2 weeks later. And so I went through all of this, do I go, do I not go? And I really learned that geography is really important, really understanding the risk and not operating from the place of fear, but the place of facts and taking, responsible risks. So I felt comfortable going. I did my research, talked to Aaliyah, and was ready to go. But I will say, Petra did not disappoint. It is as incredible. I've been trying to get to it for, 20 years. So thank you, Jordan Tourism Board. I finally got to experience Petra. But I really think of a moment that really struck home to me, what really is Jordan. So was standing in Jerash, which is this amazing city just north of Amman, with our guide Majdi, who's incredible. And we're looking around at these Roman ruins, amazing amphitheaters. I mean, you feel like you're in Rome. And he says, the street that you're on really isn't where the original street of the Roman ruin or the Roman Empire. They were below us. And we're still excavating, and we have Bronze Age ruins. We have Neolithic ruins. And it really struck me in that moment that Jordan is a country of layers. You keep digging and digging and digging, and you find amazing things, such as the meaningful travel. I mean, the sites that we went to were incredible. The antiquities, the women's cooperative, where they're really trying to enhance women's lives. The oldest map of the Holy Land we got to see in mosaic form. So for me, Jordan is layers, and it is so much richer than I could have even imagined. So I'm really glad we went.
Cool.
Thank you. And Kimberly, how about you? This was your first trip as well. What sticks out in your mind?
It was, I think like many of us, I've been incredibly lucky to have traveled the globe many, many times. And even being in travel, still have a bucket list, and Jordan was on it. And so when I was offered this opportunity, I didn't hesitate, even as Shannon and Chuni said, where so many people did. And I did have so much knowledge because I'd been to so many places in the Middle East and around there, from a travel, economic, political, and even spiritual standpoint, but really didn't truly understand the depth and the scope of it. I think as Bruce, mentioned, how safe we felt. I felt safer than I do at home in Los Angeles. And it brought me back to what we'll probably many of us think about, but when we were trying to figure out how to get people to come back to Mexico, and started creating these maps in tourism to showcase how far the drug cartel conflict was from where you're going in Riviera Maya. And it all came, kind of to light in Jordan because the distances are so short, but yet so far away. And I think, one of the things that really stood out was we were at Tel Elias, home of the prophet Elijah, standing on this beautiful hill overlooking what I thought were just some beautiful mountains, left, right, and center. And as we pointed out, that was the highest peak of Lebanon. And over there is the Golan Heights. And if you look here, you can look, towards, Palestine. And it brought to light what to me was the biggest point of, personal enlightenment was that Jordan is a hub and a community. It is a hub where people trade crosses, and has for centuries, where knowledge is found and hopefully not forgotten. But yet what I realized from a spiritual standpoint was how uneducated I truly was, even when I thought I had been. And for instance, when we went to Mount Nebo and Bethany beyond the Jordan, I think as people here can attest, I walked in saying this is going to be great. I can see, this crossroads of spirituality that brings all types of religions together, especially the Christian ones with the Old and New Testament. But it actually did bring me to tears. And I can't think of a time in travel in my recent memory that I've been brought to tears of happiness and joy and understanding again of where and how important this area is, these people, like Bruce said, the authenticity and making sure that we keep uncovering the layers and we keep looking for, the history and the blessings around that, because it is a crisscross of people's cultures and more, and a place that people should go to, not just read about. And that was my greatest takeaway, that cultures can thrive. One last thing, which probably was an aha moment, was we were talking in Amman, and one of the JTB team members mentioned that, like many of them, she had grown up there, and she was Jordanian and Ukrainian, which to me was, a pretty amazing thing right then. But not only that, her mother had a boutique coffee shop, one of the first ever open in Amman, that was, focused on truly roasting, not just the Starbucks, but truly roasting the coffee. And a few of us got up early in the morning and walked to that beautiful coffee shop. And I had the most amazing vanilla latte I've ever had in my entire life. And I can still taste it today, and Starbucks will never, ever be the same. And that was another a great takeaway. But, to me, it was a true blessing.
Oh, well, thank you, Kimberly. And Bruce, you were a first timer as well, weren't you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what were your impressions and your experience?
Well, Arnie, as you know, I work in the Canadian market, so we have a fairly small staff, and we have to cover a lot of different things. So one week it may be the world's biggest new cruise ship, and or a new all-inclusive resort in the Caribbean or Mexico. So you don't always have a chance to do the things that you particularly love. And so for me, when I travel, what really turns me on is making connections with people and meeting people. And I like to feel welcome where I'm going. Don't always do that in some places where tourism is not necessarily, a fully positive force, or there's too much of it. You don't always feel welcome. Jordan, the warmth of welcome was something I have not experienced in my career, from the customs guy at the airport who gave you the usual customs death stare. And then, once I was through, everything was like, you are so welcome to my country. And from him to Princess Aaliyah, who we met, the eldest daughter of King Hussein, an amazing person, as down to earth as they come. And everybody was interested. Everybody wanted to have a conversation. Sometimes I think we've lost that art in North America, where people really just love to sit down and chat. And honestly, you can do that in Jordan at the drop of a hat. People are friendly. The streets felt very safe and family oriented. It was really an amazing welcome there. Food is a huge part of their culture. It's a big part of my culture. That's why I'm so big. But it was fantastic. Everything was delicious and fresh and well prepared, and every meal was an occasion. And also I found out that, Jordan attracts I think, a certain kind of people, because there was 20 people in our group, a very large group by most media trip standards, and they were just the best people. And they were the same kind of people that I met in Jordan. So maybe, like attracts like. It was an
So I
amazing.
know that the tourism board, Jordan Tourism Board, is going to be hosting something called the Travel Agent Next Door. And so why should Canadians attend? What is from your experience?
Right. So the Travel Agent Next Door is the largest network of independent agents in Canada. They're at 1,400 or something like that. They announced last year that their annual conference, they were going to charter a Royal Jordanian 787 and go to Jordan. And it sold out in 45 seconds, literally online, which is not always the case with their conferences, but obviously everybody was really intrigued. Now, since October 7th and the things that have happened since, there was quite a large percentage of the group that had real trepidation about going. Is it safe? Is it? And so it really worked out, serendipitously for me to be invited on this trip. And the president of Travel Agent Next Door immediately got in touch and said, "You got to help me out here. We got a lot of people who aren't sure if they feel safe or not. And we want you to let us know." So through Facebook posts and video and so on afterwards, and it was so easy to do that and to tell them, just go, because you're going to have an amazing time. And I think they're full up. I don't think there's any more people really sitting on the fence. So Jordan's going to have a plane load of 200 Canadian travel agents and 40 suppliers, and hopefully that translates into a whole lot more new business, and I'm sure it will for Jordan.
Thank you, Bruce. So Shannon, I know you've been to Jordan before. We actually hung out there together a little bit. And but did you get anywhere you hadn't been before? Did you see anything you hadn't seen before?
Yeah, yeah, there were a couple of sites that we had not been to before. And one that was really touching was Dar Nemeh, which is the women's cooperative being run by women who were orphans. So they hit age 18 and they have to leave the orphanage, and they need some sort of path. And this organization created this amazing combination of handicrafts that the women and some of the other locals around make, and it was all really wonderful, attractive stuff. I'll admit, there might have been a few of us that had to buy an extra duffel to come home because we bought so much stuff because it was so great. The quality was great. I cooked with olive oil last night that we brought home from Jordan. And then if you've seen the movie, The Biggest Little Farm, it's a really touching movie about a couple in California that learned to farm and interact with nature. And we got to experience that firsthand at the Carib House in Madaba. At the end of the night, I asked the group, I'm like, would everybody here agree that this was a top 10 meal of your life? And everyone raised their hands or nodded or cheered. It was truly an incredible experience. So yeah, there were many others, but I don't want to steal anyone else's thunder. Those were two that really stood out to me.
Yeah, and Shannon, there's a question in chat that just came up, which is, what is the name of that organization exactly?
Dar Nemeh, and so, yeah, there it just
got
dropped into the chat.
Yeah,
yeah, it's very special, and we had an amazing meal there too. There were no bad meals, none.
So Greg, I know that you two had previously been to Jordan, but your focus and Tourism Cares focus and the relationship with the country is a little bit different. Can you talk about Tourism Cares' special relationship with Jordan and what you saw on this trip that complemented your previous visits?
Absolutely. As you know, Arnie, and many others know, Tourism Cares celebrated its 20-year anniversary last year. And we set forth with a visioning statement for the next 20 years. And I can't think of a better way to start off that journey into the next 20 years, but a return to Jordan. For us, we had established the Meaningful Travel Map of Jordan in conjunction with the Jordan Tourism Board in 2017 in anticipation of our Meaningful Travel Summit, which we conducted in 2018, where we brought a contingent of travel professionals to Jordan at that time to be able to experience these incredible social enterprises that we had chosen to be part of that map. That included, of an original 150 social enterprises that had kind of put their names forward, a vetting process in which we ultimately identified a dozen to be part of that initial Meaningful Travel Map of Jordan. And for me, this trip represented a return to two of these social enterprises, both Iraq Al Amir and Bani Hamida. The contingent that we traveled with got to return to these social enterprises. And for me, it was the opportunity to see their development, to see a totally different infrastructure, a totally different sophistication and maturity that they had in terms of being tourism ready, in terms of their being so comfortable in receiving tourists. And for me, that spoke so greatly to the power of the map. And as Shannon mentioned, for us to go to Dar, Nameh, and Carib House represents the next chapter of the Meaningful Travel Map, as they will be two new impact partners on our map. So, you know, as Shannon said so eloquently, you know, it's all about these great culinary experiences, these great arts and crafts that we had to buy additional duffel bags for, but really, what these places are about are transforming the lives of people, and in particular women, across Jordan.
Yeah, I see, by the way, some people are putting questions into the chat. If you would put the questions into the Q&A. I just want to take a moment for that. So Aaliyah, you made a trip down to Wadi Rum in the southern part of the country. Tell us a little bit about what you saw and experienced.
Yes, so I was so happy that we were able to sneak in a trip to Wadi Rum in this trip as well. Wadi Rum is my favorite place on earth. I always talk about it on any forum that I'm part of, and it's this incredible desert in the south of Jordan that used to be an ancient seafloor, and now is just this beautiful landscape of granite sandstone mountains and red sands. You know, a lot of movies have been filmed there over the years, including the Dune, that's Dune 2 that just coming out. But the most incredible thing about Wadi Rum is the people that live there, the Bedouin community that lives in Wadi Rum. And everybody has spoken about the incredible hospitality of the Jordanian people. And I think the Bedouin communities really capture that so well. You know, they want to share their culture with you. They want to sit with you and have tea and talk about their culture and ask you questions about your culture and where you come from. And it's just such a beautiful way for us all to, I think, increase our collective understanding about each other, which is so important right now. And I also want to say that Jordan, over the years, I've been coming to Jordan you know, over 7 years now, close to 20 times I've been to Jordan. And talking to other travelers, I really see it as a gateway to the region. Once you understand the beauty of this place, how safe it is, how welcoming the people are, it is an excellent place to go and enrich your understanding of the whole Middle East region as well. So it's a really excellent opportunity. And I'm so glad that I was able to do it again with the Jordan Tourism Board and with all of our friends here as well.
Having been there that many times, was there any place you got to that you had not been and were able to see another side?
Yes, you know, actually for me, we went to Umar Rases, which is a site, an ancient site of a Byzantine church, I believe. And it was an interesting discovery for me to see that it was a Christian church that was built during an Islamic rule in Jordan, which is, again, talking about the layers of how religions and cultures in Jordan overlap and interact and cross over each other. That was a really interesting example of that, to discover the church that was built after, the Islamic rule started in Jordan. And it's called Rasas, that site as well.
So Bruce, you had mentioned that you met a princess.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how they came about and what that was like?
Well, we were invited to visit the royal stables outside of Amman, and horses and animals are a passion for the princess. She was just, you're sort of waiting for this pomp and ceremony, and it's just a normal woman getting out of a car and coming up and saying hello. And then when you get talking to her, she was just the most interesting and engaged and down to earth. And she's committed to a number of causes. She's worked with autistic children. She's worked a lot with animals and has done a lot for conservation of animals in Jordan. And she just seemed like a really lovely person. And for someone who, we have a monarchy, the remains of a monarchy in Canada, and knowing, sort of how people feel about that, I was amazed in Jordan how people there love their royal family and really feel like these are people who have their best interests at heart. That was surprising to me. And, so when you talk about sort of misconceptions, I had misconceptions too going into this place, and it was so easy to be disabused of them and to learn. And our guide, in the first call we had before arriving, he talked about how 90% of human nature is similar and 10% is different, and we always focus on what's different instead of what's similar. I really felt like in Jordan, you could really focus on what's similar and unite with people. And it feels like the differences get smaller when that happens.
Yeah, well said, Bruce. So before we go to the questions from people who are watching this, does anybody else have anything else they wanted to add about the experience and the trip?
I just wanted to jump on something where you had asked about Princess Aaliyah and a little bit more. And I let everyone know that the Princess Aaliyah Foundation is, what the foundation that she created and supports. And it's not only, the horses and it's called the Growing Together program, that for the, helping different people on the spectrum with autism, but the entire foundation, I think, epitomizes the people of Jordan. And I remember reading it before, and its aim is to promote compassion and respect for all creation. And that just said so much about the Jordanian people, that it's, not just about, different sectors of, humans, but also how we all interact with different types of creation, whether it's, animal, human, or just, the topography and the regions that we live in. And so I think that is something that just stood out and was truly emanating from Princess Aaliyah and every single person that we met, regardless of who they were.
Yeah, the Jordanian royal family, I know when I was there once, I visited, it was a workshop of artists who had handicaps of various sorts. It was a large, where they could sell the things they made. Beautiful, beautiful work. People very, very grateful for the opportunities. Many of them came from very poor backgrounds and were able to make a living and supplement for their family. Greg, I do have one more question for you. Have you been able to gauge the return on investment for the Meaningful Map since it was released in 2018?
Obviously, there are a lot of intangibles, like I said, just the ability to be able to go back and see. And right now, obviously, the gauge is a little bit askew from the standpoint that tourism is so off in Jordan. But like I said, they are ready and capable and able to be able to receive tourists. But I think the biggest gauge is the fact that the investment that was made specifically by tour operators and travel advisors after 2018 and our trip into these social enterprises, that development of the meaningful travel map of Jordan is one that the Jordan Tourism Board likes to say has contributed greatly to an overall growth in group travel to Jordan. And they basically say that in that period of time, group travel has, in terms of the average night stay in Jordan, has expanded by 1 additional night stay. So we feel that the map was a huge contributor toward that.
Oh, that's great. So I'm
Yeah,
looking at
I'd say one more thing. We did a trade event in Jordan that launched on October 6th. So if you do the calendar math, you'll see that it actually, the war erupted while we had people on the ground. We had actually team and people flying in who left, and then by the time they landed, their phones had blown up. It was too late to cancel our event, and so we moved forward. The Jordan Tourism Board was amazing to work with. They were very up to the exact minute of what was happening. They gave assurances of security. So it was very disorienting for us since we had just hit the ground when the conflict erupted next door, and no one had any problems. None of the itineraries, none of the people. It was an incredible experience for those who went, even though knowing that there was some seriously huge problems next door, and it didn't affect even at the peak, even at that moment. So I know that everybody that went has become an evangelist for Jordan, and it truly is one of the most special places. And where you and I had lunch, Iraq Al Amir, I don't know if you remember, you and I ate outside, and there was that big room that was dusty and full of equipment. Well,
Right.
that is now a functional restaurant room with art all over the walls. So it's totally expanded since you and I were there back in, I guess it was 2019. So it was really fun to see it firsthand. And the meaningful travel map has been such an important piece of the growth.
That's great.
And I'll just add, Arnie, and I think we've all touched upon this, but Jordan is being lumped in with all these other countries, right? And I think you've heard from everybody that it's an incredibly warm and hospitable country, hands down. We were all just so impressed with that. And the region and certain areas are inhospitable, no question about that. And as travel industry professionals, it's so important to educate. I think it begins there. I think some of the questions touch upon this. How do you get people to travel there? But it's sort of educating and not just blanketing an area with a broad brush. Part of my job is assessing risk. And I've worked with companies in assessing the very risk of going to a place like Jordan right now. And all I'll say to that is that, risk can be managed. And on our trip, those risks were managed. Things were put into place. Things were put into place for Adventure Elevate back in October. So, I just wanted to end with that comment about hospitality and a place that is hospitable. We were there. We saw it firsthand. And now I feel like in my job, I can do an even better job of talking about that because I was there. So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to echo that as well from Kimberly, because when I first came to Jordan in 2017, after my trip, I got exactly the same questions. Is it safe to travel there? Isn't this a dangerous place? How are you traveling there alone as a woman? And I think if anyone in the industry has an opportunity to go and experience this place by themselves, rather than sort of looking at those blanket statements, like you said, Kimberly, it is the most important thing to do, because then we all become these evangelists, like you said, of the place. And obviously we all love it so much now. But I think seeing that with your own eyes rather than, reading something that you see in the media is extremely important. So I encourage everyone to take that opportunity if you can.
Yeah.
And would you say, many of you have mentioned that you've been throughout the region and things, is Jordan a country you would recommend as a standalone country? In other words, a lot of times people would have paired it with Israel, or maybe even still would, or other countries in the region. So enough for a trip. And how long a trip do you think someone might want to plan?
I can take, I've taken groups to Jordan before, and usually it's a 10 to 11 day trip, standalone, only Jordan. And there is not enough to see in those 10, 11 days. So there's absolutely a lot of things that you can do in Jordan, and it absolutely deserves the time to spend in places like Wadi Rum, in places like Petra, but also outside of that, right? Ajloon in the north, the Dead Sea, the eastern deserts that you guys have seen on this trip. And there's just so many things to see, and there's absolutely enough to see there in a standalone trip.
So if you were going to give a recommended itinerary, so let's say, and a first-time visitor is going to absolutely want to see Petra and Wadi Rum, maybe spend a little time in Amman, Jerash, but I want you each to name one other thing that you would consider that is an off the beaten track or maybe lesser known destination. So Bruce, why don't you start?
Well, I was really impressed with we did an afternoon sort of castles in the desert, and this was it's all desert now. It wasn't at the time that these places were built necessarily, but you know, we went to one that was a palace for you know, a wealthy person 2,000 years ago or 1,900 years ago, sort of a hunting palace. That was amazing. But, you know, it's flat rock desert, nothing. And then there's this massive structure in the middle of nowhere. Another place was like a caravanserai where people would stay at night. And, you know, the first floor was for the camels, and the second floor was where people stopped as like a roadside inn. I found that to be a really amazing afternoon, just out in the middle of nowhere.
Kimberly?
Yeah, I think, you know, there were so many places that were in the middle of nowhere, but in the middle of somewhere, and were wonderful in both of those regards. I was truly transfixed by the north, you know, when we went into Jerash and then stayed in Ajloon up in the mountains, and I could hear the wildlife in the evenings, and the flora and fauna was spectacularly green, and rainbows of colors of flowers. You know, the running path I went on at sunrise, no one to be seen, but you could see the wildlife that had been there before. And so that was an area that was amazing to me. And I think goes to the point you asked of, is it a standalone destination? It is. And it's not just one that you think of for the Jordan Trail and for active people or for religion. And so, you know, the different religious groups that go, it's a gastronomic place. It's a cultural mecca. It is one that you could truly have a mix of different experiences across the country from. And so, you know, that Ajloon was amazing, obviously going, you know, down to Petra, but I think that there were some even pockets outside of Petra or, you know, the Dead Sea that you could immerse in and really get to understand in the local community and the region in a much more in-depth way.
Okay. Greg, what about you?
I'm going to go much more broad brush and just say, be sure to explore part or all of the Jordan Trail, because that really, for us, presented the opportunity to push tourism beyond Petra. And many of the social enterprises that we originally put on the map are along the Jordan Trail. And I think the Jordan Trail has something for everyone, from the standpoint that many see it in terms of some of the hiking opportunities as being fairly rigorous and for the adventure crowd. But you have the opportunity to kind of jump into a part of the trail and bike and also do it at your leisure, and then be able to experience these incredible social enterprises that line the entire Jordan Trail.
Okay, thank you. Chuni.
Yeah, so I think going to the social enterprises is absolutely key. I think it distinguishes sort of the typical trips to go see sites to really understanding the heart of Jordan, which are the people. And I would say heart really jumps out to me. I know it's a word that Malia uses a lot, is heart, and it is so apparent when you go. The other thing, and I don't know if this is off the beaten path, but I was really just astonished by the mosaics that are throughout the country. I think it is super worthwhile to go slow and read about the mosaics before you go, and to read about them after you come back. There is the mosaic of the Holy Land in St. George, which is a Greek Orthodox church. And there's questions about, was this a map to really kind of document the Holy Land, or was it a map for travelers, journeyers coming through that needed to understand where to go? And these things look like they were just made yesterday. They're exquisite. And I will say that there was a mosaic actually in Mount Nebo, where our guide, Majdi, who's done this for 30 years. I mean, that was actually another highlight. You'd walk with Majdi, everybody knew him. The police officers wanted to take a photo with him. He'd walk through Petra, and there's our equivalent of Johnny and Sam waving, or whoever. It was astonishing. But when he showed us some of those mosaics, he became like a 20-year-old tour guide who had just started off. The excitement and the pure joy, it was as if he was sharing a moment with us for the first time. And it was really incredible. And to see that excitement of a Jordanian who'd done this hundreds, thousands of times, was really a special moment. So I think the mosaics were really, really cool.
Thank you. And Shannon.
I'm going to echo, I can't remember who said it, but the social enterprises are so incredible. Actually, I'll bounce between the social enterprises, and then I went to Petra for the 4th time on this trip because my wife was along and she had never been. So I wanted to experience that with her. And it is just amazing every single time. It doesn't lose, it doesn't tarnish or varnish. It's absolutely a peak experience every single time I go. And it was really fun to be with my wife and see her light up as you walk through Petra. And I think Majdi said this, the amazing guide, I think he said only 10% or something like that of Petra is even still excavated, available for people to see. So just the majesty of it, the grandeur, it's hard to describe. And people, I have talked with a number of people since coming back, and they said, did you feel safe? And I said, of course I feel safe. Is Jordan safe? Is anywhere always 100% safe? No, nowhere. Not in my little town in Colorado am I always safe. But that being said, travel is one of those things where you do want to take risks of getting on a plane, of being in vehicles, and getting somewhere that's super special. And I've been telling friends, you should go now. I mean, now is the time. It's unfortunately the tourism sites are empty, but from a traveler perspective, it is absolutely incredible, hard to replicate. So, yeah.
I'm going to actually give a slight variation on this question to you, Aaliyah, and that is, yes, what is a place that you really like, but also, as a solo female traveler, have you felt safe? And are there any areas that maybe you didn't feel as a solo female traveler you would want to return to? And what were some of your other experiences traveling through Jordan?
Sure. Well, first I want to say, and I'm going to plug Wadi Rum again, because again, I just think it's a place that usually people, when they come to Jordan, they rarely spend overnight. They usually go for a 4-hour Jeep tour through the desert. I really advocate for anyone to give themselves the gift of staying in the desert for a couple of nights, because the decompression and the peacefulness that you feel when you're in the deserts with this beautiful culture is just something so special, and I want everyone to experience that. Also, speaking of gastronomical experiences, I would also add Karak on that map in central Jordan, because some would say that Karak is where the best mansaf in Jordan can be found. And mansaf is this national dish of Jordan that we also tried on our trip, which is this heaping plate of rice and meat with dry fermented yogurt called jamid. So some people would say that Karak has the best mansaf, and that's in central Jordan. So that's another place that I would also recommend. You know, I've been to Jordan close to 20 times, and not once I felt unsafe as a woman traveling there. I've always experienced utmost respect from people, everyone that I interact with in Jordan. And I think it also comes from, you know, respecting the culture that you're entering, understanding the cultural norms of the place that you're entering. But in my experience, I've never felt unsafe in Jordan, or for that matter, in a lot of other places that I traveled to. You know, I went to Sierra Leone last year. I went to some very interesting places around the world. And like someone said, I think Shannon, it was you, that, you know, a lot of places around the world have challenges. Here in Chicago, I live in Chicago. There are some areas in Chicago that have challenges as well. So it's knowing where to go and when to go. For example, I probably wouldn't show up on the streets at midnight anywhere in the world. You know, I wouldn't walk alone on the streets at midnight anywhere in the world. But in my experience, I've felt nothing but respect in Jordan when I come across all the people that I meet there. I don't know if you, Chuni or Kimberly, have anything to add there.
I'll just add, and Kimberly and I were together, but that Carib House meal was fantastic. There was a cave beneath the restaurant that, I don't know, somehow Kimberly and I missed. And we thought our group left us, Shannon, everybody else. And so we're walking around the street, we got a little lost, and we're wondering why our deadbeat friends left us. And but anyway, there's a young man who walks by, and we're on a dark street. You know, we didn't know.
And it's late.
Right, and it was late, like 11, I don't know, it was pretty late. And did he ask us if you were American, Kimberly? Something like that. Are you from America?
I think he just, yeah, stop. Do you mind if I ask you a question? You know?
You're like, oh, what does he want?
Oh, here we are.
Here we are. And he goes, I want to go to America. And will I be able to get a job there if I go? I was like, that's it? And we're like, yeah, of course you'll be able to get a job. And he thanked us, like, from the bottom of his heart. It was an incredible exchange. It was surprising because I didn't know what to expect, but I thought that was pretty, dark street at night, some random guy asking you a question or stopping you. That's not the normal interaction. So
yeah,
we felt very safe.
And I think that, kind of closing out, from my perspective, I've traveled as a solo traveler many times, and obviously as, a solo white woman. And oftentimes you go to places and you have to reach out to, ask for help or ask a question because people are going about their day, or they look away. It's just different cultures in terms of, not wanting to, reach out to help someone they don't know. And that was the opposite of what occurred day in and day out, from that instance that Chuni said to when I went for a run, and I'm running with my GPS phone in front of me, trying to figure out, am I going to find my way back to where I need to go. There wasn't a time that someone didn't welcome me and say hello and give me a big heart, hello, I love USA, and welcome to my country. And that was reaffirming to who we are as people. And why we're in this industry is to bust those myths. And some of them aren't real and some that we need to learn more about, but to find ways that we can coexist and help each other and move forward in life as a society.
Okay. Well, I think just to close out, and Shannon and Aaliyah, you've been there the most. Is there a best time of year to go? What are there times that maybe you want to avoid?
I can answer quickly. I'm a baby when it comes to heat. So February was perfect. I loved it. I thought it was absolutely amazing. And it was just the right temperature for being able to still get into the Dead Sea without freezing. So for me, but that's a personal choice. I like it when it's not super hot.
I'm exactly the opposite of Shannon. I love coming in the summer because it's so warm. But a lot of people choose to go in shoulder seasons, April, May, September, October, when the weather is mildest. So that's always a nice time to go because of the weather.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody on the panel for participating, everybody who has been watching and listening to this. And I think there's no question. I learned, I've been to Jordan maybe only 3 or 4 times, but I learned a great deal about it from this webinar, and I'm looking forward to going back. But just also as a reminder, if you had asked a question in the Q&A, the Jordan Tourism Board will get back to you with a response. And so thank you all, shukran, and have a wonderful rest of the week. Bye-bye.